Hello, my name is Katie Steeves, and I am an assistant professor of sociology at Trinity Western University in Langley, British Columbia. My research areas of interest include how Christian congregations can flourish across Canada, as well as more specifically, the experiences and stories of women in ministry, what some of the barriers to flourishing might be for this population, as well as how they can contribute to flourishing when they have kind of full participation and full membership in religious leadership. The sociological perspectives that I use in my work tend to take on more of an interpretive approach. So that means that I'm interested in individual interactions, daily life, how these things can contribute to culture building, both for individuals and within organizations. So for this video, I wanted to bring perhaps some sociological insights on culture and to make some connections to these with how culture and flourishing can happen in religious congregations. So first of all, what is culture? From a sociological perspective, we can think about culture as being like a repository or a place for a group's positions on what is good, right, and true, a whole collection of norms and values about what we think to be right, true, and good in our group or our society. And then conversely, of course, that includes the things that are not. Organizational culture, whether healthy or unhealthy, is something that is learned both directly and indirectly. If we take a sociological perspective, that's one insight that it can give us. In religious settings, for example, congregation members might learn something about your culture, or even visitors might learn something about your congregation's culture through interacting with its members and leadership, but also through the impressions that they get, picking up on cues perhaps more indirectly as they attend services or meetings and events. They'll kind of start to get a feel for what you seem to value and how you act or live this out. So what your culture is. A helpful metaphor that comes to us for picturing culture in the social sciences comes from a theorist named Anne Swidler. Swidler pictures culture as being like a toolkit or a toolbox. Admittedly, I am not the first person that you would want to call if you need to do home improvement renovations, but I do understand what a toolbox is, and I can picture it being filled with tools like a hammer, a screwdriver, a tape measure, each one presumably needed for different tasks if used properly by someone who is much more handy than I am. In an organization's cultural toolbox, Swidler suggests there are also tools that can be employed for different needs and situations. Instead of hammers and screwdrivers, your church's cultural toolbox, for example, might include things like the symbols that you display on your walls in the building, the daily or weekly rituals that people participate in as they engage with your congregation, the mission and value statements that you have on your website, or perhaps also posted around your building, as well as, interestingly, the types of stories that you tell about the past, present, and future of your church family or congregation. Kind of like family stories that get told about where you've been, where you're going, and this can matter very deeply for shaping culture. The role that narratives and stories can have about creating an identity or a cultural identity for who a congregation is has been something that my research team and I have been really interested in as we've been looking at one particular case study working with a church over the past 2 years here in British Columbia. This case study congregation, like many others, faced challenges in things like attendance, volunteering, giving, and overall engagement during the COVID-19 pandemic, although they are starting to see a resurgence of people coming back and engaging in all these ways again now. What was interesting about this congregation is that they have actually also faced several other major challenges before COVID-19 that have influenced who they are. They went through experiencing an arson and losing their church building. They did several mergers with other congregations. They came together to construct and build and plan a whole new church building, which of course was a cultural building opportunity and experience in and of itself. And we were interested in these types of events because it seemed like no matter what happened, no matter what challenge or difficulty this congregation faced, it didn't get them down. It didn't prevent or present overwhelming obstacles to flourishing. Instead, it seems that they've been able to take these challenging events and create family stories that have contributed to the culture in a much more positive way. I'll give you some examples of this. In this church's culture, as we've talked to members and attended services, we've noticed that there is overall a sense that past challenges and changes have made them internally stronger. If they can go through this, they can go through anything. That they believe that these changes have led to good things and internal growth, as opposed to being negative. And that they also believe and tell each other, hey, we can face whatever comes our way because we've overcome so much together in the past. These stories about the past seem to be being intentionally passed on by past and present leaders to each other, to members. Members talk to each other and share these stories. And what we're suggesting is that this creates a sort of cultural toolbox filled with tools like resilience, hope for the future, memories of past flourishing and challenging times that suggest, hey, we're going to make it through this now too. We can do this again. This culture building and the type of culture we're seeing in this congregation seems to be very aspirational, meaning that they're able to maintain hopes and dreams for the future, even in the midst of very real barriers or challenges. A culture of possibility suggests that even in the midst of real disadvantage, they can see themselves continuing to flourish, and they believe that they're going to get through any obstacles that might come their way. In conclusion, an organizational culture can be powerful for helping leaders and members have an imagination of what is possible within a community. My reflection question to close is thus, what tools seem to be in the cultural toolbox of your congregation? Even if things have been difficult lately, and you're noticing that the cultural stories seem to be those of defeat and complaining, how might you be able to flip or turn those around to help cultivate a more aspirational or hopeful cultural narrative? And if you're interested in learning more about these sociological ideas about culture as a toolkit or a toolbox, then I'd recommend the Swidler article I referenced in this video, which I believe is linked here. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to hopefully building more hopeful, positive cultures of flourishing in our congregations in the future.